Ew. Gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors. It helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
All right. He gave it high thumbs up. He said it was a good show.
Who?
Xavier? Yeah.
Oh.
He always listens to the show.
He's the only one who listens to it. Hey, Xavier. Welcome to this podcast. This is episode 28. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello.
Okay. And I'm also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
All right. So we start off with some fact check from last episode. Was it like a month ago we did an episode, I think? Yeah.
Yep.
Month and a bit. So I mentioned talking about Jared Leto, the Jared Leto action figure. What do you call those guys? Action figure? Very small doll.
Boy dolls.
Toy dolls?
Boy dolls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boy dolls, okay. Is made by Nika. This is the company there that I mentioned that. And I couldn't remember the killer girl in Blade Runner 2049. Her name is Love, apparently. She comes in a pair with Jared Leto. Jared Leto and Love come together as a set. We were also talking about Halloween, which had just, I guess it's probably just finished its run in the theaters. Did a pretty good run there for Halloween, around the Halloween occasion. And apparently we were talking about Jamie Lee Curtis having been in at least 2 of the movies. Well, it turned out she has been in 5 of them. So she was in the original one in 1978. She was in Halloween 2 in 1981. She was in Halloween H2O 20 years later, which was done in 1998. She was in Halloween Resurrection in 2002. And of course, she was in the latest Halloween, which is just a rebranding. I'm not sure what this current story is. I'm probably not going to go see it. But Halloween 2018. And ironically, though, I did end up watching these on whatever channel was broadcasting them over and over again as we led up to Halloween. So I did catch
AMC, I think, was showing them all.
Yeah, so I watched bits and pieces of them. But and apparently that I didn't realize this, but I've heard it before, but it doesn't get mentioned often enough that the mask that Jason wears is actually a Captain Kirk mask worn backwards, worn inside out.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Creepy.
I didn't know it was inside out. I thought they had plastered over it or something. That explains why it looks weird.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure they've probably done up the mask better now, because I'm sure the first one was just original. In fact, in the first Halloween, am I not mistaken in thinking that he actually doesn't kill anybody? And it's not him that kills; it's the. Oh no, I'm thinking of another movie.
That's Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th has the twist.
Oh yeah, that's what I ended up watching a couple of those Friday the 13th as well, which I've never actually seen any of them. I didn't realize the first Friday the 13th is not Freddy that kills. Jason. Sorry, it's not Jason that kills. It's Freddy's from the Nightmare on Elm Street. See, I just never really got into.
You got to dip your toe into the horror waters, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know.
But not at Camp Crystal Lake. That's bad news. Not at Camp Crystal Lake. Don't dip your toe into that water.
Yeah, no, I've heard that. That's where he hangs out. All right. Following on with the rest of our fact check, at 56 minutes, we were talking about the fact that Bradley Walsh, who's now one of the companions in the new Doctor Who, was also in Law and Order UK with Jamie Bamber. I said Starbuck, but he actually played Apollo, not Starbuck. Starbuck, of course, was played by, I'm having a brain fart. What's her name, Jonathan?
I also am having the same brain fart.
Well, needless to say, Jamie Bamber did not play Starbuck. He played Apollo in the Battlestar, the redo of Battlestar Galactica. All right, so was it just called Battlestar?
No, it's Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
The reboot.
The original reboot, yeah. Okay. At 44 minutes, I mentioned the mail program that Mr. Robot uses in his email client, and that is Proton Mail. So does that sort of segue us at some point into talking about the new Bohemian Rhapsody movie? Which have either of you guys seen it yet?
I have not seen it.
And Jonathan?
No. It's been on my want list, but I have a bad feeling it's going to pass me by at the rate that it's in and out of theaters as movies tend to go nowadays.
Right. Now, so the other thing you mentioned, you saw a doctor with a scarf, and then you went screaming away from the television back when you were a young lad.
Yep.
Was it Sylvester McCoy? Like, he would have been the doctor at about that time, 1987, 88.
It's possible, although, the one I recognize is the one who has the sort of rainbow scarf.
The one you see all the people wearing at the conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Tom Baker. Okay, yeah. I was trying to save Tom Baker from the.
Again, it wasn't Tom Baker that chased me away from that show. It was the cardboard box with a plunger they called the villain that really threw me.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they've improved since then.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it used to be like, you used to have all these sort of video effects that you could do by fading in and out of things, and like all these really hokey things. And that's how what I always found funny about the early Doctor Who's is that's how they did all their special effects. They did the video feedbacks to get the all kind of strange loopy things and stuff, and hoping that people wouldn't recognize that these were just cheap video effects that they were doing.
I am curious. I would like to know what the budget on those shows was, because people are wearing
not a lot.
They look like they're wearing their street clothes. Pretty much. It's just shot in like some backlot on the BBC lot somewhere. Like it does not have a high production value, even remotely.
No, it doesn't. No. I think Coronation Street had more money to play with than they did. So. Yeah. Anyway, the last thing I mentioned, First Man. I was a little leery about First Man blowing it. First Man is, of course, a story about the Apollo 11 mission, specifically about Neil Armstrong. And based on what I'd seen in some of the trailers, I was a little worried about it. But it turned out to be a fine movie and pretty accurate from what I remember and all the reading I've done over the years on First Man. And that takes us to the end of Fact Check, unless you guys have something in there. No?
Well, I'll throw in a quick one. Katie Sackhoff was the name we were looking for.
Thank you.
There you go. That way we won't have to fact check it next week for our fact check.
All right. Okay. So, Jaime, you got you got a link here about CBS?
Yes. Fans of, many fans of multiple things. So if you're a fan of Star Trek, CBS has another show announced, a whole slew of shows, actually. I think we talked about the Picard one probably last month. This one here that they announced is Star Trek Lower Decks. It looks like they ordered, 2 seasons of this as an animated series by the writer of Rick and Morty.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and the real hope here is, given the name, it reminds people of that one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where they showed what if you're not the senior staff? What if you're just the lowly ensigns working in various departments and you don't know what's going on? You just know that the ship is blowing up or somebody's space pregnant, somebody's on fire, that sort of thing. So I think they'll have some fun with this. And I know a lot of folks like the Star Trek animated series because they could do all, we were just talking about budget for Doctor Who. Certainly the original series struggled with budget as well, but when it's animated, they can do all sorts of fanciful things that don't cost quite as much.
Sorry, could I just the detours thing sounds, or the what's it called? Under decks? What's it called?
Lower Decks.
Lower Decks. Doesn't it remind you? There was a canceled Star Wars project a few years ago that Seth Green was going to do. The guy who does Robot Chicken was going to do Star Wars Detours. Do you guys remember that series being announced?
No,
it sounds familiar.
They released a trailer, and it was like a tongue-in-cheek look at the Star Wars universe by the creators of Robot Chicken. It was Matt Senreich and Seth Green were going to do this series, and they put out a trailer for it, and they produced 40 episodes of it. But then Lucasfilm got acquired by Disney, and Disney didn't like the series because it was poking fun at the Star Wars universe, and they wanted to do the rebrands. They just canned it. So they had made 40 episodes and then just put it on a shelf, and it's never been seen other than the trailer.
Wow.
But it reminds me that concept of Lower Decks, like bringing in that sort of Rick and Morty, like, hey, let's have some fun with an established piece of the zeitgeist that everybody knows about. It just immediately, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, it's like somebody took that great idea for Detours and did Trek instead of Wars.
Well, hopefully, with Disney coming up with the new streaming service, they'll need content, and they've got content sitting there, and it's not, I can understand why they were a little bit hesitant to lose control of the brand when they were just starting up with the sequel trilogy. So now that they're going to wrap that up pretty soon, and again, they'll need content on their streaming service. Lois, it seems like it might be a more natural fit there.
It's a really good point. Maybe we should start a little campaign. We need a hashtag going.
Bring it back.
Hashtag bring back
Release
detours.
Release Roger.
Release Roger.
Yep. All right. Speaking of spin-offs, spin-offs, I guess. Apparently Michelle Yeoh has been in discussions about Emperor Georgiou character coming out as a series on the CBS All Access as well, to sort of redeem Jaime's subscription, I guess. A couple of links here from different sources about that. I don't know if you guys had heard that at all, or
Yeah, it sounds like they're going to do the what's it called, Section 31.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's the clandestine group, sort of a off the books sort of group for Starfleet and the Federation.
Yeah, I wonder, they were talking about it as a limited series though, not like an ongoing, right?
I think so. This was reported so weirdly. Originally, I think the first headline I saw was that it was going to be Captain Philippa Georgiou, and it was sort of gives the idea, oh, maybe it's pre-discovery, and then you read these details like, no, wait a minute, it's for the Emperor, which means it's her mirror, spoilers for season 1, her mirror universe version, and so that would make more sense as a limited series too. As you can only go so far with that character, and it would be nice to have a nice little arc there.
Well, yeah, that's true. But unless you hadn't watched the show, you wouldn't know that Michelle Yeoh is playing the surviving character of her iteration. Let's just leave it there. All right, so Jonathan, you have some sad news to share with us? Which we kind of know about.
It's been a sad week. So, as most of our listeners would know, Stan Lee, passed away this week, age 95. Obviously, a heartbreaker. I mean, again, you can't feel too awful if somebody makes 95 and has the kind of legendary life that Stan did, but it's hard to let go of a legend like that. I mean, this is one of the most influential creators of the 20th century. I mean, without him, we don't get, creations like X-Men and Spider-Man. And obviously he worked and collaborated with a lot of artists to create those, but, he was seminal to the creation of all these incredible characters. And, it hit home for me. I, like so many people have shared this week, I had a passing connection with Stan. I interviewed him several years ago he did a superhero Christmas book, and so I was supposed to interview him in person, but he wasn't feeling well, so I ended up talking to him from his house in LA, and he was just the nicest gentleman, indulged my fanboyedness, talked to me for a half an hour, was nothing but kind and gracious, and every person I know, and he's crossed paths with a lot of people that I know, everybody said he was just the classiest guy, genuinely cared, genuinely happy, loved the attention, loved the love that people had for his creations. And I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, they've reports this week that he's filmed a few more cameos for some of the upcoming Marvel movies, things like Avengers 4 and maybe the new Spider-Man film that's coming. But I can't imagine what it's going to be like to have no more Stan Lee cameos and no more of that great Excelsior voice. It's a real hard week.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Right.
And off that, we also, we lost another piece of sort of sci-fi, well, maybe not as iconic, but the actor who did the voice for Hal in 2001: The Space Odyssey died this week, and he was Canadian. Mm-hmm. Douglas Rain, who was the voice of Hal 9000 in 2001: The Space Odyssey, died on Sunday, and he was 90. Canadian British theater actor. Most of his career was done in that, but created those iconic lines, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. This is again somebody whose work really impacted a lot of us who are big sci-fi fans, and another sort of sad loss this week to lose somebody like that.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
I think I read something really weird that he had never actually seen the film, so he hadn't seen his performance in the final cut. I don't know if that's true, but that was something I'd read around the time that they were putting articles out about his demise.
Huh. Really? Huh.
That is weird.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be really hard to do. I mean, you'd have to not have the TV on at all, like over Labor Day weekend or any other sort of holiday where they would tend to play sci-fi movies from the past that are easy to bring up and that people enjoy.
Yeah, he even did some Apple commercials as Hal back in the 90s, I think. Well, yeah, interesting. So speaking of bringing us down, Jonathan, why don't you bring us down one more time?
Okay, but I promise I'm going to bring you back up after this. But we got one more little downer. So news this week that there's going to be no no Doctor Who Christmas special this year. No Doctor Who Christmas special. This is the first time in 13 years. Like, this is not nothing. This is, since the renewal of the franchise in the first part of this millennium, they've always had a Christmas special. It's something you sort of set your watch by. And this year they've decided that because of the timing of the show, the season did start a little later than it normally does. Usually it starts, August and ends a little sooner. And then they have a Christmas special, 6 weeks, 2 months after the season ends. Last year's famously was the transformation episode where we got our first glimpse of Jodie Whittaker. And this year they've announced no Christmas special, but there's good news.
There's an Easter special?
They're doing a New Year's special. Oh. A New Year's special. So I'm curious to see what that's like. I am a little bummed. It was a little bit of a tradition to, I didn't necessarily watch it on Christmas, but I was always like, PVR and watch it either late that night or, Boxing Day afternoon. I would sit down and watch my Doctor Who Christmas special. And it always had these great Christmas themes and stuff. So I don't know, maybe Chibnall, the new showrunner, didn't have a great Christmas idea, but he had a great New Year's story to carry over.
Right.
But
Well, they've even done, they even used to do Christmas Day simulcasts. Like, you would go to the theater and watch it at the same time as it being revealed in Britain. I guess now they're doing that. They did that with the first episode this year, right? But it was on in the afternoon as opposed to late at night. So
yeah,
well, that's weird. No, grinning snowman, and
it was last year. Was it last year that was Nick Frost as Santa Claus? Or
that's true. Yeah.
I
think so. Yeah.
So
that's weird. And they actually had the guy who plays Filch. Reprise his role. He played the Doctor in the docudrama.
Yep.
That they did. So, but they had him come back as the original Doctor and talk to Matt Smith sort of from the shadows, the two of them ran around and solved problems, right?
Yeah, it was with Capaldi, wasn't it? So that was like Capaldi's last one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah. Again, it's funny. You don't even sort of second guess these things till they're gone. But it does. You realize like, wow, that's not a small chunk of time they've been doing that. And it's weird when traditions like that sort of disappear. Obviously it's getting some attention. People, even lots of Whovians online going, well, I want my Christmas special. But yeah, you realize that you sort of have comfort in those things always being there until they're gone, like Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So what's The Mandalorian, Jonathan?
The Mandalorian is a much anticipated new series that is going to be coming to Disney Plus, which is Disney's forthcoming Netflix rival. So they've already started hiring and filming new content for this new streaming service that's going to be coming next year. They've already made some announcements in the last week, and one of the announcements that they made was that we already knew The Mandalorian was coming. We knew that it was going to be done by Jon Favreau, he who directed Iron Man famously, right. And he is going to do this, I think they said 8-part series set in the time between Return of the Jedi and Episode 7. So Episode 6 and Episode 7, which is an uncovered piece of territory, which is kind of cool. And this week they announced that Pedro Pascal is going to be the star of that. Now, Pedro Pascal, you may not know him by his name, but you would know him if you're a fan of Game of Thrones. He was famously the Red Viper on Game of Thrones. Oberyn Martell. He was the guy who spoilers, got into the fight with the Mountain, the giant. They had the big, huge, epic fight, and he had his skull exploded rather graphically on screen. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so he's going to be the lead. I don't know if he is the Mandalorian or if he is, but he is going to be the star. And I must say, I was a fan of his character. I thought his portrayal of that character was great. I mean, I knew the character from the books, obviously, and then really enjoyed his performance on the show, and was very sad when he met such an untimely and gruesome demise. So it'll be great to see him back in a role like that.
Yeah, interesting. And they brought the mountain back as a zombie, right?
Yeah, he was really badly injured in that fight, but he was kept alive, and now is this weird zombie monster who hopefully will get his comeuppance in our forthcoming final season, which we can talk about in a minute. And also in the announcements from the Disney Plus announcements last week, we also found out that they're going to do another series starring Rogue One's Cassian Andor. So he was the leader of the mission that ended in the retrieval of the Death Star plans.
Yeah.
So Diego Luna is coming back to do a backstory story about Cassian being the rebel spy. Obviously, he was one of the most interesting characters from that movie. He had this sort of really interesting backstory where clearly he had to do some very dark things in the name of the rebellion, which was a really interesting twist. We hadn't really seen that sort of, the bloody side of the rebellion where people are, like at one point he just puts a gun in somebody's chest and pulls the trigger to keep him quiet. We never really saw that side of the rebellion. We always saw them as this very noble, well, we're doing this for the greater good kind of, thing. We never saw that making hard decisions and doing the black ops, wet work stuff. So this could be really cool. So they're bringing that probably later, maybe 2020, 2021 on that same Disney Plus service. So there's two. Sounds good. 2 Star Wars series. And then we also got news that they're going to do, we knew that they were going to dip into the Marvel stuff because that was a no-brainer, but apparently they're dipping in hard. They're going to bring up Loki and give him his own series.
Is this going to be Tom
Hiddleston? Yeah. They're going to do Tom Hiddleston. Again, they're talking about it as a short-run series, so it's not going to be, years and years and years of it. But they say that it's going to have, high production value. It's going to be not like a TV show. It's going to be like, a series of small movies to look at, this character. And there's rumors that they're also looking at doing a Winter Soldier and Falcon series as well. So this service is sounding pretty good. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is one of those take my money kind of moments. Two new Star Wars series both sound really good. 2 new Marvel series both sound pretty good. There's also rumors that they might do a Scarlet Witch series with Elizabeth Olsen. Like this is good. And they haven't even gotten into the the Disney Pixar stuff as well. Plus they're going to have their whole back catalog. This is just the fresh content stuff. What do you guys think?
I think it's pretty enticing. I think you're quite right. I mean, we're going to talk about the CBS All Access Short Treks, which is getting my $5.99 a month teased out for the next couple of months until Discovery Season 2 starts. So I'll definitely have to take a look at this Disney Plus and see what's on there. Just because I've sort of signed up for other stuff, I might wait to see early initial reviews of a lot of these shows, but it seems like there'll be enough there for me to take the plunge and add another subscription to my list.
I mean, you're in the States, so the one thing that hasn't arrived here in Canada yet is the new DC Universe app. So DC Universe launched in the States, and they have started with original content as well. So they've got a new Teen Titans series that is getting a little bit of buzz online. People are talking about it's filmed here in Toronto. There's a bunch of new series that are coming there. Swamp Thing, Doom Patrol, a bunch of products. Plus, apparently, you get comics and access to exclusive stuff, and it sounds really cool. But we can't have it. Have you had a look at that yet?
I haven't, and I definitely want to see at least a couple shows get some buzz and hopefully finish their season so I can, jump in with either a free trial, or if I really have to put down a month, I can sort of binge through stuff and then decide, oh, okay, yeah, I want to continue on. As you mentioned, they have that extra layer of the comics access and exclusives that might be really enticing too.
Yeah, it's funny. They're not talking about it as like a streaming service like Netflix. They're talking about it as like a fan app. They're saying like, we're creating content for people who live, eat, breathe DC Comics. So the TV shows are an enticement. They've got a whole back catalog. Apparently the old Batman series are on there. The animated stuff's on there. Movies are on there. And as you say, like apparently there's, thousands of back issues of comics. You can actually, really good e-readers apparently built in. But yeah, it's not quite Disney Plus or Netflix. It's really a little more niche. But if you're a fan of that stuff, it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, speaking of not being able to see things though, Jonathan, last time we were talking on the show, you were saying that you couldn't find The Flash anywhere, but now it's on Netflix, right?
Yeah, so if you'd like, I have a little speech prepared on that one.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
So yes, good news.
As long as it's a little speech.
It's a little speech. Good news, fellow Flash fans. Yes, you can watch Flash here in Canada. So now all 4 shows are available on 3 different services here in Canada. It's a little disjointed, fair enough. Okay, so on Sundays you can watch Supergirl on Showcase. It's on at the same time you'd watch it on the CW in the United States. Great. We've got Arrow on Mondays, and that's on Space here in Canada. Okay, good. Again, check mark. We've got Legends of Tomorrow that's on also on Mondays. I don't know when that's airing on the CW, but fine, we can watch that. The Flash has moved off network television, so it's not on contemporary television now. It's only available through streaming, and it's only available through Netflix Canada. Okay. I'm fine with this. As a matter of fact, it's nice. They take the commercials out. I can just watch it. However, it airs Tuesdays on the CW. It does not come to Canada until Thursdays. So we're getting it 2 days later. Okay, that's ridiculous because, the internet. But also, we are about 3 weeks away from their annual crossover series. Every year, some combination of those shows do a crossover. It started out with just Arrow and Flash, then it was Arrow, Flash, Supergirl. Last year, it was all 4 series. This year, they're going to do a crossover. Starts on Sunday with Supergirl, carries over to Monday to Arrow, carries over to Tuesday to Flash. Unless you live in Canada, enjoy your 2-day break. By the way, the internet's going to ruin it for you. So...
That's pretty rough.
I am a little ticked. Like that is some really crap treatment of Canadian fans. Now I grant you there's only like 35 million of us. Of those, all right, so what, like 16, 18 million are Canadian Flash fans? Is that optimistic? A little optimistic? No?
Maybe.
But either way, that's not a good way to treat your Canadian fans. Dear Netflix, dear CW, that's not a good way to treat your Canadian fans. Making us wait 2 days while we know the blogosphere will destroy everything that happens. And if you think people are going to wait, you're fooling yourself. Just saying.
Yeah, for sure. Can we have a sidebar on Supergirl for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I've had a couple of months to think about this because we've talked about my roots in comic lore and all that kind of stuff. So when I was younger, I used to love watching Batman when I was a little kid, and I watched most of the Batman series. And then I found Superman, and it was is it Steve Reeves Superman? The one from the 60s or 50s.
Oh, yeah. What was his name? Yes. I know the fellow you're talking about.
Anyway, with Lois, he committed suicide apparently at some point in his future. But
well, that's debatable. But yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it started out as a black and white series, and then it went to color, and it was fun and stuff like that. And I remember I was thinking about too what comic books I would have bought. So I bought Superman comic books. I was more into Superboy and Supergirl, right? And Superboy had the dog and all that kind of stuff. With Krypton, I think his name was. No, what was his name? Crypto. Yeah. So I was totally into the sort of DC universe. That was my sort of thing. And occasionally I'd watch Spider-Man or buy Spider-Man books, but it was mostly it was Casper the Friendly Ghost and Superman and maybe the occasional Archie comic if my sister left it out, for me to read. Anyway, so that was my jam, right? And I really started watching Supergirl on the show. I watched the first couple of seasons, and then I had a little trouble with catching up on the third season. What are we in, the fourth season, fifth season now?
Just started fourth. Yep.
Yeah. So I started watching the fourth season again, and then I remembered, it kind of dawned on me what it is I don't like about the show. It's all about racism.
Oh yeah. This season more than anything, it's it's not subtle at all. The whole refugees.
It's like
they're kind of beating us over the head this season.
Yeah, I mean, and in the same way that I really enjoyed the Enterprise series when it came out, Star Trek Enterprise, but once they went to war with the Xindi, I kind of like, okay, enough. I get it. It's America was going through Gulf War at the time, and everybody's like into conflict and war and stuff like that. But if you look at the original intention of Star Trek, the original series, they weren't so much about war. They were about solving problems, and they had all these metaphors. I mean, they had their racism metaphors and that kind of stuff as well, and they had their male female kind of issues and stuff like that, and race issues of race. They kind of like glossed over that, and we're now in the future. We're now beyond war. We are beyond money, and that kind of stuff. So it really bothers me that super like they've got this bar. It's like, so is it a metaphor for being gay, or is it a metaphor for being from Mexico and from like being an Aboriginal and coming from Europe? Like what are they doing? Like, please explain it to me, because I'm not enjoying the show at all.
Well, okay. To be fair, it's been both. There was a very strong, metaphor for gay, transgender stuff going on the last couple seasons when one of the lead characters came out. So there was.
One. Yeah. I wasn't talking about her. The sister.
Yeah, no, but there was also an undercurrent of aliens as excluded in these different ways. This year, the metaphor has been taking very, very much to reflect U.S. political atmosphere. They're they're not doing it very subtly. It's pretty ham-fisted, I think. Yeah, I mean, again, I like the characters, but the plot is not, I think, as strong as last season. I think shows like Supergirl and Flash and Arrow and genre shows across the board are as good as their villains are. Last year, they gave her a really good foil in Rain, who was somebody who was physically her equal, and there was some mystery element of who it was. So last year, even though there was some up and down development in the writing, it sort of was propelled by that. This season, they have done this sort of storyline where it's a little more, Supergirl doesn't really have a physical equal in that way, and so it has struggled. And then they've also tied this very overt immigration refugee plot line in, using the aliens who are living amongst the humans in Metropolis as the allegory. And I can't defend it. I mean, it's not done terribly well. I mean, I still ride for the show. I like all the characters so much. I think Melissa Benoist is fantastic. Maybe one of the best portrayals of a superhero we've seen. She's just so incredibly likable. But the show is, I think, really trying to find its footing. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is, taking us back to last season, you'll recall there was a scandal on the show. The showrunner of the show was dismissed in a cloud of scandal.
Yep.
That was apparently good, according to some of the stuff that I've read. Has apparently, cleared up the sort of atmosphere that was a little toxic on the set. But that can't help but change the show. They obviously are going in some new directions. They're looking for some new voices. And, I think like a lot of art, they want to capture a sense of the moment. And, obviously the writers have something to say, but I can't say they're saying it with particular clarity or grace at this point. But I'm still going to be there every week, and I'm going to tune in, and I'm going to hope that it's going to turn the corner. I was really impressed with the decision that they made to cast Nicole Maines this year, who is playing Nia Null. If you're watching the show, she is a new reporter at Catco. She is also a transgender person. She was born Wyatt Maines. And so this is a very positive development for that kind of casting and for having that kind of representation on television. So that's something. Not to mention the fact that she's just a really good actress. So that's good. But I don't know that there's enough there to scream from the rooftops right now that you love the show. To be frank, I don't know if you guys are watching any of the other CW stuff, but I'm not having my socks knocked off my feet in any of them. Flash is still my fave, and I think they're doing the best job this year, but I think it's one of those comfort zone things. They just get their characters so well. But Arrow has kind of struggled, and it's the exact same problem. Their villain this year is the same villain they had last year, and he's boring. So I don't know. Again, I can't defend it. I don't know. Jaime, are you watching Supergirl this year?
Yeah, and I can understand where you guys are coming from. I'm not going to proclaim it to be like my favorite season. I will give them pointed credit for, even though they've been rather ham-fisted, I think the way they gave the motivation for the main villain, Agent Liberty, like you watch that episode and you're like, yeah, if all these coincidental things happened to me and my family, I'd probably turn like that too.
Yeah.
You'd have no choice. Like, it's an insane amount of coincidences, but if those happened, it would cause me to become a supervillain too.
But if all those bad things happened to you in that order, wouldn't you just like burn your house down with yourself inside? Like, clearly that's where that guy's life was going. Like, everything bad that could have possibly happened incidentally happened to him in one episode. It was comedically organized. Yeah.
It recaps about 3 seasons, I guess, by that point, worth of bad things happening related to aliens and Supergirl. But with that, I mean, maybe I look at it slightly different since I'm south of the border here. So I'm in the however your politics lean one way or the other. It's definitely a dumpster fire here in America that's keeping Canada nice and toasty.
We're hoping to not be downwind, thanks.
And so maybe it's just more of like some level of catharsis to see like, yeah, that's kind of the stuff we're going through here, and some of the stuff isn't quite as straightforward, and Supergirl doesn't have a villain that she can just punch, right? She can't just punch an ideology, and so how do you deal with that? And so I'm hoping they're kind of going for, like, it's been a little bit of a slow burn, and I hope they pick it up in the second half of the season. And certainly they haven't even brought into play the weird like Russian twin Supergirl.
Yeah, well, that's where you're going to get the punching. It's going to come with that.
So one last thing before we leave Supergirl behind. On the commercials, they've been showing her wearing a helmet of some type, like a spacesuit.
Well, the villains this season released some kryptonite into the atmosphere, and it had permeated. So she was going to be very sick. Started becoming very sick, and so they put a outfit around her that protected her from the kryptonite, but it covered her entire body. It was short-lived, but
so I missed that. Okay,
yes,
yeah, surprisingly short-lived. Like, this is one of those like side sort of things with Supergirl where I'm like, all right, this will be it'll follow like the tone of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is the big bad for this season. Oh no, wait, no, they wrapped it up in 3 weeks. Okay, well, what else is going to happen? And so it's like they're shoving in 60 years worth of comics history into these seasons. Like they're just shoving in stories like there's no tomorrow. Like I fully thought the kryptonite suit thing was going to be at least 3 or 4 episodes for them to deal with, and that it was wrapped up rather tidily in an episode and a half.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Was I the only one who immediately, when you saw those scenes, think Iron Man? Like, it was...
Yeah.
They were doing the scenes where they were clearly inside the helmet with Kara instead of... But it just looked like the exact same camera thing that they used to shoot Robert Downey Jr. when he does Iron Man. And I could not stop thinking about that. And I was like, wow, if they continue doing this, these comparisons are going to get ugly. And yeah, then it was over in like an episode.
Yeah, they had their fun. They did some point of view shots during some action scenes and everything. So it was rather short lived. But Tim, it's kind of weird that they didn't go with it longer, because they really heavily advertised that rather actually kind of interesting and sleek design they had for that suit. Mm-hmm. Like, it would make a really good action figure that you could put up on your desk.
Yeah, for sure. But then you can't see her long flowing hair. So,
well, that's why, if they make like, was it like Figma style one that has like the replaceable heads and replaceable joints and stuff, so you can have different sort of backgrounds and stuff. Yeah.
All it is was little girls running around with decapitated dolls. All right, let's go back to the next one, which is the Game of Thrones, Jonathan.
Game of Thrones. We've got news this week. Game of Thrones final season is coming in April. They haven't given us a release date yet, but we now know for sure. There was a little speculation that they might wait a little bit longer. They might go into the summertime, so it's good news. April's traditionally when Game of Thrones pops back up on our radar. Last year, 2017, when we had our last season, they had moved things into the summer, and while that was great, I think the prospect of waiting 2 full years for another season was a little much, so getting it a few months early is welcome news. Of course, we're only going to get 6 episodes, although they are saying 6 episodes, but they're saying that each one will be akin to a film as far as the production value, as far as the extra episode length, detail. They say that they've spent a rather exorbitant amount of money on per episode to really go out with a bang. So I'm in. When is it April yet? Is it April yet?
Yeah, then they're going to come out with the extended box set, Blu-ray extra stuff copy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you'll buy it, and then there'll be a new version, and you'll buy that, and there'll be a new version, and you'll buy that.
Right.
Well, there's going to be a new series too, right? They've already announced.
I was going to say they're going to do a spin-off, and
they've already started casting for the prequel they're going to do.
Prequel?
They said they're going to do a prequel that's going to be set during the Long Night, when the winter came in the past. They referenced that in the books and in the show, that long ago when things went all bad and the heroes of the realm had to defend it in the past. There's this legendary, long winter that they had, and the heroes who survived were the bravest of all. So they're going to tell that story in a prequel series, which I would not be surprised if we start seeing the trailers for that just in time for people to not cancel their HBO subscriptions next year when Game of Thrones ends.
Right. Cool. All right. So Jaime, hit us with this Star Trek lore you've got here.
pretty quick one. If you are a Star Trek fan, and you probably are if you listen to this show, you might enjoy this Lenovo desktop PC that is in the shape of the Enterprise. That would be NCC-1701A for Alpha. It looks pretty slick.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be in the show notes for those of you transporting it home. It's not 100% accurate. I mean, they have to put the hard drive somewhere, and they put it between the nacelles. But, you see it from certain angles, and you say, wow, that looks actually really nice. And I think it has some sort of activity when the hard drive is
got nail.
Yeah. With a turbo button to really get you to warp speed on processing your Word documents.
Not cheap.
2180 $2,180 US, and I guess it starts there. So I guess if you deck it out with the full max, it will be a higher price that is not listed here.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Now we know what Jaime wants for Christmas.
All right, so here we go. We hit the main event yet? The main event is Short Treks. Yeah, Short Trek Calypso. So Jonathan and I were talking about it briefly yesterday on the phone, and I right away I found it a very confusing episode. I don't know where it fits into the timeline. I'm not sure if this really happened. What was going on? What do you think?
I mean, which timeline are you talking about? Because it takes place 1,000 years after some point at which the Discovery is on an unknown mission, and its crew is no longer on the ship, and the Discovery is just sitting there waiting for them to return.
Right. So it's basically the plot of Red Dwarf.
Yeah. Well, that's farther in the future, but yes, you're pretty close. No cat.
That's true. No cat. Do you get the reference, Red Dwarf?
I've never seen Red Dwarf, so no, I don't get the reference.
All right. So you've already sort of semi-explained part of my problem with the show, but yeah, I kind of got the impression it is in the future, and now I guess the ship's computer is talking to this main character, who's this female AI that's involved in this relationship. So why don't you give us some synopsis without spoiling too much about the show, the episode?
Okay.
Anybody?
I'll try my best to give us without spoiling too much. All right. I mean, it's sort of weird because there isn't, in my opinion, there isn't a lot that really happens. It's not a real plot heavy episode. Whereas I think even in the 15 to 20 minutes that we had in the prior episode with Ensign Tilly, I felt like a lot more sort of happened there. Even though it was, these are constrained budget sort of episodes, and so they're using pre-existing sets, and they're using only 3 or 4 different sets. I think we've seen. This one to me was more about the sort of character interaction and sort of the emotion and feelings. So you have the ship's AI, Zora, which apparently after the last 1,000 years has gone V'ger and has become a fully realized AI rather than being the rather simplistic ship's computer that we know and love from Discovery in the current timeline, I guess, of season 1. And it stars I forget the actor's name.
Hodge?
Thank you. As Kraft, who is a person who gets pulled in from an escape pod, who has been obviously injured and been through some sort of war. Apparently has been away for some time as a warrior. And they have sort of more a budding romance that builds up between these two characters over the course of some amount of time. I don't remember if they specify. It seems like he's been on the ship for a while, even introducing things like Taco Tuesday, which he has neither idea of what tacos or Tuesday happened to be. So it definitely is a different time than when the normal Discovery we know. And it ends in a rather sort of poignant way, and it feels like it was more of a an emotion for me than it was this was clearly moving the story forward, or this was setting up some particular plot points. Maybe it sets up a character for all we know. I mean, it's not unheard of to have weird sort of space and time things happen in a Star Trek show. So it was like
the Picard episode where he gets sucked inside the satellite and lives for 1,000 years and learns to play the flute and all that. Mm-hmm. Right. So I kind of wondered, is he really in the ship, or is he in sick bay and this is all happening in his head? What do you think?
I think it's real, and I think the real takeaway that I got from it was, this is their way of writing around why Discovery isn't among the iconic Star Trek ships. I think the idea was that they go on this mission. mission, the ship is abandoned, and therefore that way they don't have to explain why it's not around during Enterprise or any of the other sort of series that are in that era, or the Star Trek, the original series, right? They can say, well, it went on this mission sometime in the 10 years between now and the start of the next, what would be the original series. It goes on this mission, it gets lost in deep space, the ship abandons it, and they say, hey, AI ship, you stay here and hold your position, and we'll come back and get you. And it's their way of sort of writing Discovery's end game out. The question is, are we going to see that mission?
Yeah, if they do end up going out that way, I really hope that CBS really has it planned out. Like, I don't mean like, oh, they had to plan like, this is going to be the 7th season. Just, okay, whenever it is we decide that we don't want to do any more seasons, that final season hopefully will end with a hint towards this. And that would be a nice tie-in to get it all tied in together.
Yeah. I read a good piece, The Hollywood Reporter, I'll put it into the show notes. The Hollywood Reporter did a great piece. So they interviewed Michael Chabon, who, of course, is an amazing Pulitzer Prize-winning writer. He was the co-writer of this episode, so that's a nice get for that, by the way. He said he wrote it based on the Odyssey. So this is the story of Odysseus landing on the Isle of Calypso, hence the title Calypso. So Odysseus is coming back from battle. He's hurt. He stops on the Isle of Calypso. Calypso falls in love with him. He's tempted to stay, but he wants to get home. So it's an allegory, obviously, and it's a take on that story, which, if you read the classics, is part of that. And so there's that piece to it. But then he also was talking about, how to tie that into the Star Trek lore. It's really interesting. I'll put it in the show notes. Please take the time to read it. It's interesting. It's an interview with Aldous Hodge and Michael Chabon, talking about why they did this episode. So lots of cool stuff in there. So I won't spoil the whole thing, and I certainly won't take credit for it. Hollywood Reporter. But yeah, I think when you put it into that sort of frame, obviously it's an interesting way to spin that classic story. But like the last one, I think we talked about it in our previous Spockcast, I came away from that one not knowing, is this part of a larger narrative that's going to carry forward into season 2, 3, 4, whatever? Did they introduce us to those characters so that they can build on it? Or is it just, this is all there is, and it's a touch base with the characters? It's a 15-minute amuse-bouche, get you ready for the season? Or is this part of a larger narrative that's going to tie together over the coming seasons of the show? I'm really curious, because this was interesting. Like, the idea of what was the mission, the idea of, are we going to see some weird... I mean, this Discovery's got some pretty cool abilities. We saw that in season 1. It can warp through dimensions. It can warp, from place to place. Maybe it can warp 1,000 years into the future, and, maybe somebody's going to come back and get the ship and go on more missions or something. Like, you can't write anything out, right?
That's true.
So, I found myself, just like Tim, and we talked about it yesterday, a little perplexed coming out of it, like, what just happened? Like, none of our familiar characters, other than the ship. There was some very Trekkiness to it. But I don't think it was as satisfying as the first one, just because that one had Tilly, and we liked Tilly, and Tilly was a recognizable character, and it really sort of continued her story from where we left her in season 1. This was something completely detached. Not in any way bad, just a little more detached.
Yeah, I definitely agreed. This one's a little harder to figure out if it would fit into Discovery as a whole, and much less season 2 in particular, just given the time frame.
Yeah. And again, interesting sort of, mysterious character. We, have, all that Aldous Hodge plays, you kind of wonder, is there more? Is there something else? Are we going to hear from this character? Or is this just one of those, ships in the night, if you'll pardon the analogy? But, is this just what it is? Or is there more? And I think that's the thing that's sort of building over the course of watching the first 2 of these, and obviously 2 more to go before we get to season 2 in January. I'm really curious. Is this foundational, or is this incidental?
Right. Anything else on this episode? What do you think?
I can't think of anything else. It's if I were to try to give a recap, it would probably be, scene for scene, and there really weren't that many scenes because it's 15 minutes. I'd say folks should just check it out. It won't take you more than, like a coffee break to watch.
Yeah, it's good. Helps if you've seen Funny Face. Feel free to watch Funny Face, classic 1957 movie, Fred Astaire, Audrey Hepburn. One of the weirder, twists to see them all dressed up and dancing, I think. A little weird.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the Funny Face. Scarface reference in there. Yeah, that's true. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we move on to the watch list now.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I'll go first. I mentioned First Man as a movie. I went and saw it the day it came out because, yeah, just, Apollo was the first thing I kind of woke up to as a young child, because I think Apollo 7 had just launched when I first became aware of space travel, and sort of, followed everything voraciously until well into Skylab and when they stopped broadcasting, things like that, right? So, and of course I followed a lot of the space shuttle missions. But anyway, so First Man is a great movie. I saw it in IMAX, or saw it in an IMAX theater, and for some reason they filmed a lot of the scenes with IMAX cameras, but they didn't broadcast. They didn't use that in the theater, which I'm a little perplexed by. But it's a sort of a first person point of view of what it was like to go to the moon, if you think about it that way. So it's very, very focused on Neil Armstrong, and I'm not sure. I kind of wonder. I've got the audiobook now because I'm going to go through and sort of get a sense of what the story is really about, because you never know with movies, they kind of play on them differently. He was notoriously a very solitary man, and very, very intelligent, very quick. You'll see if you watch the movie why he was chosen to be the first man to go to the moon. There's obvious reasons, which I'm not going to give away, spoilers. But a good story. And, his wife apparently is is it Claire Foy who plays his wife?
Claire Foy, yeah.
Yeah, she apparently is an Oscar contender because of her portrayal, but should be interesting to see. I wasn't really impressed with the guy who played Buzz Aldrin, but that's a whole other story. Just the actor just wasn't Buzz enough for me. Like, I've sort of seen Buzz speak a number of times and watched him over the years, and I don't think the guy they chose was the right kind of actor. Mind you, there's a few scenes in the movie where you can do a double take, with Ryan Gosling looking like Neil Armstrong, but not a lot, because a lot of times he looks like Ryan Gosling, right? But a great movie. You really get the holy cow, they're going to the moon for real thing here, because the camera shakes, and if you're watching it in a large theater, you're really involved in the sound and the visuals. Really give the impression of this is literally a tin can that these guys are being fired at the moon in. So that was an interesting thing. So
I've heard that Ryan Gosling's performance is really subdued, really, really stayed, sort of chill. Is that true?
Yeah, he's a bit like Kay in 2049, in terms of lack of, but then apparently Neil Armstrong was like that. He was real sort of cool operator, smooth operator kind of thing, just, very, very calm, didn't really say a lot, but when he did say something, it was impressive and inspiring and that kind of stuff. So you'll get a sense from the movie why he ended up being the first guy. It was a good portrayal. Again, I don't know how true to life it is. I've read stories about Armstrong after the fact, and he just sort of melded back into life, and he would sign autographs, but he wouldn't go out of his way to look for a spotlight, sort of thing.
And it's based on a book, right? It's based on
a book called First Man. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's a number of, the Apollo 13 movie and From the Earth to the Moon are based on another book by a guy who came after the fact, a young author who went back and researched everything heavily. But this is written by a different guy, and like I said, I haven't really got into the book yet. So, but I was curious enough to sort of see what they did because in movies they have to sort of they can't do everything that's in the book, kind of thing, right? But if you know anything about Neil Armstrong's history, they hit all the points. They didn't miss a single one in terms of what he went through to get to the moon.
Well, it's definitely on my radar.
Yeah. Speaking of getting to the moon, the other movie I have on my watch list is Bohemian Rhapsody. I was talking to my sister, we both remember where we were when we first heard the song Bohemian Rhapsody, and it was a game changer. It was sort of the second single that sort of made Queen come into our consciousness. The movie has a bunch of it's very inspiring. If you're a Queen fan, you'll love it. The music's great. It's a mix of there's a Canadian singer, I forgot his name now, Freddie Mercury, and our star, what's the name of our guy who plays Freddie Mercury?
Rami Malek?
Yeah, a mix of Rami Malek's voice in there as well. But there are some issues, and I knew a little bit about Queen to begin with, and I've read some things after the fact, and they sort of glossed over a lot of things. I mean, apparently, Brian May's first wife didn't like her portrayal in the movie, so they just cut all of her scenes out of the movie. And the way that they play challenges between, you know, the breaking up of the band and forming back again together. Apparently that was completely fiction for Hollywood's sake, you know. And they play with the timeline in terms of, like, you know, as we know, Freddie Mercury died from AIDS, but he doesn't find out about AIDS until much later than they portray it in the movie. So there's a lot of issues like that. And but what's interesting though is I have a link here from CBC. A writer talks about a very interesting thing about why his, like, you know, an open letter to fans of Bohemian Rhapsody, because he has trouble with the way that the whole movie portrays Freddie Mercury and the whole issue of being, you know, LGBTQ2. Apparently Freddie Mercury wasn't openly gay, he was actually bisexual, right? So they portray him, spoilers for those of you who are going to see the movie, they portray him as gay, and it's kind of like, you know, well, he was gay, so therefore he got AIDS, therefore he died, kind of thing. You know, and it's a shame, and he was a great artist and all that kind of stuff. But that wasn't, there was more to it than just that. I mean, you know, one of the people who told the story about Freddie Mercury, besides the guys in the band, was his former his ex-wife, who he stayed friends with throughout his whole life, right? So there are some issues with that, but I mean, you know, the point of this article is the guy is writing here is don't think that the movie is a complete work of truth. It's a fictionalized version of what actually happened in the story of Queen and Freddie Mercury, right? And I guess for the sake of making an exciting movie, they kind of played with the history a bit, right?
Yeah.
So,
I heard they crushed the scene, the Live Aid scene, though, right?
Yeah. It's. I mean, linked to the bottom of this article too is the actual YouTube video of the 20-minute performance or 25-minute performance of Queen, and it was like, you know, seminal in terms of, it's one of the greatest performances of rock history, you know, according to, you know, what you read. And it's not the full. They recorded the whole thing, but it wasn't. They didn't play the whole concert in the show, or in the movie. But it's very convincing. Yeah, and the way they rebuilt the set and the crowd, and, you know, they kind of really capture, they really Hollywoodize it a bit to make it look bigger than it might have been, right? So, I mean, it was a big show, don't get me wrong, but, you know,
this is like Peter Jackson. They have orcs battling off in all directions. They just
and there's a few ET characters in the back there, you can see in there. But the thing about it is they portray it as sounding great. I'm sure if you were sitting in the cheap seats back in the mid 80s, whenever this was, 84, I think, right, 85, Stadium Rock was not that great from an audio perspective, right? Like if you were sitting, you know, way in the back, you know, you may not have been able to hear everything, never mind see anything, right? So you're not like going to a concert today where, you know, the sound is really good and there's lots of visuals to look at. You'd be looking at these little ants on the stage bouncing around, right? So
and that's why it's awesome when bands brought giant inflatable pigs.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so it's I definitely recommend if you're curious about it, I would, you know, see it. If you're a fan of the band or Freddie Mercury himself, definitely go see it in the theater for sure before it disappears, because I don't know that would work on a small disc, a small screen, but there you go. Or an airplane. Can you imagine watching this on an airplane? Yeah. I have one small pick here. We kind of joked about it when it first came out, but Sabrina, and I forget what the actual title is, but it's like the creepy history of Sabrina or whatever.
Yeah, Chilling Adventures or something.
Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, yeah. It's actually a very good show. Like I'm just finished watching episode 8 of 10. And it's a bit of Harry Potter. It's a bit of, you know, like, I haven't watched Riverdale, so I don't know how much of Riverdale it's like, but yeah, it's a very compelling show, very well done, not campy at all. You know, the two ants aren't like the two ants in the original TV show and stuff like that. So yeah, it's I definitely would recommend watching Sabrina if you guys haven't already turned it on yet.
You watch it before the lawsuit and they have to take it down, right?
Why? What lawsuit?
They're getting sued because they apparently used some imagery from the Satanic Church in one of the episodes. Baphomet, the goat-headed god from the Satanic Church. He's in
a lot of it.
Yeah, so apparently they used that. It's something on campus. I haven't had a chance to watch the show yet, but apparently they used some imagery that's straight from the Satanic Church's stuff, and they think that there has been misrepresented what that represents, and so they first threatened a lawsuit and now have filed a lawsuit against Netflix, saying that they feel like their intellectual property of the Satanic Church has been offended.
Wait, you mean they own the visual representation of Satan?
I don't know if it's because they copied directly something that is something. Apparently, what they use on the show, and again, I've only read the article, so I can't speak to the veracity, but apparently the issue was that the way it's represented on the show is identical to something that is actually at the Satanic Church in Massachusetts. So there was some offense as to how it was portrayed. At one point, it starts weeping blood or something. I haven't.
I don't know.
Yeah. So apparently there was some concerns about the way it was portrayed. So as these things go, we've seen it in the past where sometimes you have to see series. They'll take something and they'll edit a scene out, or they'll make changes after the fact, so you won't get the same experience because of circumstances like this. So you never know. Could see the edited version. Watch it while you can.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right. So Jaime, what do you got for us on the watch list?
Yeah, one that's a little bit outside of our normal stuff, but I think sort of applies because we were talking about Rami Malek, and certainly we've mentioned Mr. Robot on this very podcast. So if you like Sam Esmail's style of directing as he does in Mr. Robot, you will definitely love Homecoming, which is on Amazon. It stars Julia Roberts and Shea Wiggum, and I forget his name. He's also in Mr. Robot. Bobby Cannavale?
Cannavale, yeah.
Yeah. As some really interesting characters. It's hard to give away too much without really spoiling things. Because it is sort of an investigative sort of show. That's sort of the premise. The basic premise is that there's a facility called Homecoming, which Julia Roberts works at, where they help soldiers who have PTSD transition back into civilian life. And then something went terribly wrong, and here it is years later. A Department of Defense investigator is wondering, like, what the heck happened? This isn't adding up on the records. It's pretty good. I wouldn't call it like a thriller. It's not like, oh wow, there's like lots of tons of crazy action going on. It's definitely more of like a moody thing, and if you watch for the way that the whole show is constructed, you'll say, oh, here's an homage that was done to something that like Mr. Robot does, or a style of filmography that they have there. And it was just really fun. It's pretty short. I think it's like 10-ish episodes, and they're only half an hour each, so it's not really a big investment to get into it. I'd say it's worth a watch.
Cool. All right. What do you got first, Jonathan?
Well, I'm going to flash forward to something that I'm looking forward to watching. So by the time we get to our next one, this will have come out. And so I and my eldest son are very keen to go see Ralph Breaks the Internet. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to catch up with the trailers for this, but it just looks like a riot. The first one was this great homage to both classic video games and classic animation, also tied into some modern animation stuff. Really good voice cast: John C. Reilly, Sarah Silverman, Alan Tudyk. It was a great, fun movie. We were big fans, and the trailers that they keep putting out, the clips they keep putting out, just make this movie look excellent. The premise is obviously, as it says, Ralph leaves his video game comfortable environment and ventures onto the internet. Chaos ensues. Looks like it's full of puns and gags and jokes, as the first one was, but obviously, as Disney goes, probably lots of heart. But yeah, I can't wait to watch this movie. It just looks so damn funny. Every time I see another trailer, another commercial, another little taste of it, it all just makes me want to watch it. It just looks like so much fun. So looking forward to checking that out in the next couple of weeks. And it's starting to get closer to really good movie season again. We sort of had the traditional, here in Toronto, we have the Toronto International Film Festival, so we get a lot of Oscar-y type movies here in September. October always brings the horror glut. We get a few more sort of Oscar movies in November, but as we start phasing further in November, we're going to get our new Fantastic Beasts movie. We're going to get this, the Ralph Breaks the Internet. We're going to have Aquaman's coming up. We're going to have Into the Spider-Verse, the new Spider-Man animated picture, which looks amazing. And we're getting another movie that I'm dying to see is the PG-13 version of Deadpool 2 that they're putting out, Once Upon a Deadpool. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see any of the stuff they're doing on this. They started doing it as the studio asked them if they could do a cut. They didn't like the idea of doing a cut that was just a cut, so they decided to go back and started reshooting scenes, and then they decided that they wanted to do more, so they actually went back and did a whole new framing sequence, and the framing sequence is Deadpool reading a story to an adult Freddy Savage in his bed, and his bed is the bedroom from Princess Bride. I mean, this is genius stuff.
That sounds pretty good. I can't believe they're going that far on it.
So not only are they doing this, but apparently the way they're decided to do it is they're going to put it back into theaters. I believe it's the second week of December that's going into theaters. And they're donating some of the money that they're making off this to charity. They're clearly having a great time coming back at this. Deadpool's one of those movies that, obviously, Tim, you and I saw it when it came out, saw Deadpool 2. I haven't been able to share it with my sons because it is incredibly blue and incredibly violent. So I'm going to go see this movie because I'm curious because those movies are hilarious and awesome. And also I want to see this new stuff with Freddy Savage because that is just too funny.
And it's PG.
Yes, they're going to do a cut. I guess they're going to take out some of the, I honestly don't know how they're going to do it. They're going to have to take out a lot of the graphic violence, and they're going to have to take out a lot of the sexual imagery. The Sharon Stone Basic Instinct scene from Deadpool 2 will have to come out. Maybe it'll be like 45 minutes. I don't know, but it's going to be worth watching. These guys love this character. These guys are going to have a good time. I love that they didn't just say, fine, we'll just make a TV cut and we'll just say, gosh darn it, in a few spots. They're clearly interested in really doing something else. And so this looks going to be so much fun.
All right, cool.
I feel like as long as we're mentioning Deadpool, I should mention that the trailer came out this week for Detective Pikachu.
Oh, God.
Which is a live-action Pokemon movie which stars Ryan Reynolds basically as Deadpool, for voicing a Pikachu that the main character is the only one who can actually understand what he's actually saying.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
Very much so. And the real-world designs of some of the Pokemon have caused some consternation on the internet. People either love it or hate it. I think it will be an interesting movie nevertheless, if only because the trailer looked like it was fun, especially with Ryan Reynolds' sort of wisecracking sarcasm style of speech.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a Netflix watch, but one that I'm looking forward to watching on Netflix.
So is that the equivalent of what used to be a rental for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this episode. So, hey, Jonathan, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JBKNews.
And you keep forgetting to mention the
and
Cineplex.
You can read my stuff on Cineplex.com if you want to. You can go to JPKComics.com if you want to, although there's like 1,000 things on there, just not a lot of new things.
No.
But I'm there.
We'll link to the Stan Lee interview for sure. And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they do that?
I'm also on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
All right. And as usual, I am Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA, on the Twitcher machine is the best way to get a hold of me. And until next month, when we have another short trek, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter @SpockCast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us out on our website at spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Interesting. I was just thinking, as we're going through the show, that we're probably the closest thing to replacing inner space that's out there right now.
We should just rename the podcast Not Inner Space.
More than just inner space. Yeah.
More than just a canceled show.
We'll wait for the lawsuit to show up. Yep. Mm-hmm. We're on Rogers too. Yeah,
the spiritual successor too.
Yeah. Wonder if I can get the former co-host to relay that to people.
Yeah. Well, hit him up on the Twitter machine. You never know.
Yeah.
Hey, boys.
Well, we were inspired by them too. Like, we were actually watching. I was watching their show to get some ideas for our show, right? So,
Yeah.
it was some of our research points, right? So,
We miss you, Inner Space. You're the best.
yeah, I know we have to watch Mighty Trains now to get,
Yeah, I haven't watched Mighty Trains. You watched Mighty Trains yet?
Yeah, I'm watching Mighty Trains. It's pretty cool. So, the funny thing about it is that, when we moved to India when I was a little kid, like 3 years old, you go across India. Like, we landed in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, or was originally Mumbai. And you take a train across the country to, it's like going from, I think India's pretty wide too. It's probably like going from Toronto to Calgary kind of distance, right? Like, you're on it for a couple of days, right? And everybody travels by train in India. So, I mean, like, I think I first sort of saw something like that, or I think the first episode of this second season was the Great Canadian, which is the train you can take from Vancouver to Toronto, I think. And it, it's like, and you can get on and off, and it's got these great big, panel windows across the top. So, like, the drive that you and I did that one year, Jonathan, it's like you can do that on a train and travel in style and all that kind of stuff, right?
So we don't have to take turns looking at the skylight?
Yeah, exactly. But, and they don't, well, I mean, and they drive during the day, and I think you can get on and off too. Like, it's kind of like a cruise, and it's about as expensive as a cruise too. It's not inexpensive, right? So there's also the Polar Bear Express, which is another train that goes up north, like, up towards Hudson Bay, but not quite that far, right? I've heard is quite spectacular too, right? Yeah. But the train that he does in, I think, the second or third episode this season is like this grand train that goes like the Emperor's Express or whatever in India, and it's like, this really high quality, sort of Orient Express kind of route, right, where you travel in style, like the Raj kind of thing, right? So again, not inexpensive, but I guess memorable if you're gonna see India that way, right? So yeah, so this one they just did was this last episode was about, or 2 weeks ago, was about the train, like a super speed train that goes across from Madrid to Barcelona in Spain, and it travels as fast as like an F1 car kind of thing. So 200 miles an hour or whatever, something like that. Yeah, so pretty cool stuff.
Well, you call me when he does Snowpiercer, then I'm on board.
I've never actually, I've tried to watch that a couple of times, but I've never really got very far with it. I did actually take there was a turbo train that went from Montreal to Toronto. I took that once with my dad. We flew to Montreal, watched the game at the Forum, a hockey game at the Forum, right? And then we took this turbo train back, and it was like this really cool train that travels between Toronto and Montreal, like, in like not quite the 5 or 6 hours it takes to drive there now, right? So
yeah,
I think it was like 3 hours or something like that. It wasn't super duper speed, but it was, pretty fast. And that train's now long defunct, right? So yeah, so that was fun. Like trains.
Yeah.
Let's see what Sheldon likes trains and flags.
As long as you're not, filling your basement full of them, it's probably fine.
Yeah, no. I'd have to get rid of the Macs and the guitars.
Yeah. One small hobby.
Yeah,
I could use my comic books as a great base for the train tracks.
That's true.
If I decide to expand my hobbies, I could just combine them.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard about on More Than Just Code, we talked about your man cave there. Well, it's not really a man cave, but it's your storage locker of collectibles and stuff, right? So floor to ceiling, right?
I didn't, but which portion of it, I suppose?
Well, we were talking about how much stuff you have in there, and the fact that we weren't talking about your comic book boxes at all, but the back room you have there off the family room, and I'd mentioned that you couldn't swing a cat without hitting something, and Xavier replied back that you can. They have actually tried to swing the cat in there.
I have been trying whenever I can to swing the cat. I've actually gone through and done a little bit of decluttering. I managed to get rid of a little bit of stuff to try and tighten it up in there, but it's a weird, it's just like so many other things. At a certain point, I feel like, especially now that I'm not writing regularly about comics and graphic novels as I was for 15, 20 years, I always felt like this, I should probably hold on to this book because I may want to go back and reread it in case the next person, like if there's an author's work or a writer or artist. I've sort of held on to so much stuff that I was like, well, I want to hold on to that. But I think now that I don't necessarily see myself pursuing that in the same way. I think, there's probably some stuff in here that I could cull.
So how do you cull it? Do you put it on eBay or take it to a comic book store, or what do you do with it?
Different things. I've donated large chunks, boxes full of stuff to the library. The Mississauga Library is actually a really good collection of graphic novels and comics. But theirs is pretty mainstream. So especially sort of alty stuff, which I like, I've boxed up bunches of stuff and taken it over and just said, this is for you guys. Have a good time. I have turned some of it in, tried to trade some of it in to see if I can get, a little credit here and there towards other things I'm interested in. But and some of it I've just frankly hey, I know somebody who's a fan. Here's a handful of books or a bag full of books, and off you go.
Right.
But yeah, I mean it's hard too. Again, I am, as most people in middle age tend to be, I'm still wistful for the notion that I will get to the things I want to get to. Right. I'm still going to read that again. I'm still going to watch that movie. I'm totally going to listen to that album. I'm sure, and I watched my grandfather go through this in the last few years of his life, where he was just systematically being like, "Yep, don't need this anymore," which is a little, it's a little morose, but he was literally like, "Never going to read this book again. You want it?" It's like, well, that's all right, fair point. Maybe I'll get to that point where I will sort of make the conclusion in my mind, when I finish reading this book again, I will never read this book again, and therefore I can get rid of this book. But I just don't know that I'm to that point with a lot of stuff that I'm very attached to. Some of these books, they're stories, comic book stories or novels or albums or movies or things that I've enjoyed for my entire lifetime, and the idea that I can take them down off the shelf and watch or read or enjoy them still gives me comfort, especially because I have this vain notion that I won't die penniless. I'll actually be able to enjoy my retirement years and have some time to read and watch movies and do all the things that so many of us lose track of, time during our working years. You're like, I'm going to get to that movie or that series or that, recollect that whole, there's some series that I've been dying to read. I have a whole run of some books where I systematically bought all the books, but I know that it's going to take me, with my work life, it's going to take me a couple weeks or a couple months to get through and read the whole thing. Like, oh man, I'm not going to do that anytime soon. I'll wait till I'm 75.
Right.
Now I just have to convince my wife to move the 60 boxes full of comics I have with me to the next place when I'm 75 to read them. By then they'll all be on some great Netflix-esque comic app that actually in the States, there's this great Comixology in the United States has this great feature where you can get Comixology Unlimited. It's a great idea where you pay a monthly fee and you get to read all the comics digitally.
Yeah,
is it available
like
here in Canada,
right?
You ask? Why, no, it's not, because screw you, Canada.
Wow. You and your paper copies.
So therefore, we have a choice. You can either pay the per book digital copy price, which is certainly lower than you would pay for a actual physical copy. However, it is not an inconsequential amount of money. Or you can go scrummage through the old secondhand stores like I do and find copies of some of these books for less than you'd pay for the digital copies. So the problem is that in the end, you end up with a hard copy and you're stuck with hard copies, and then you have piles and piles of hard copy things.
Right. So what does a comic book cost these days?
New book, average new book would be $3 to $4.
Oh, okay. All right.
Depending on the publisher, the size, the quality of the paper, lots of variables in there. But yeah, $3 to $4 is pretty standard. It's not nothing. A lot of places now are doing same day digital. So on the same day, you would go on a Wednesday to a comic book store. Wednesday's comic book day. You would go to the store to get your new books. You could get the digital copy off of sites like Marvel.com has a great app with a reader in it. So does DC. Comixology, which is run through Amazon, has that as well. So if you're paying $4 in the store, you're paying usually about $2 on digital. And you can download it or you can just read it. You don't have to download it if you don't want to. And it's yours, obviously, to keep. Comixology has these amazing sales. I don't know when the next one is, but I every single week check in because a couple times a year they have sales where they do $1 collections. where you can get, a limited series or like an 8-issue run of some book for a buck each.
Oh, okay, right.
It's $1 US, to be fair. You can do it through Amazon.com here in Canada. It's one of the things we can actually do. You can order it there and pay just pay the difference in the exchange rate. So it's $1.25 a book. But either way, the value is there. So I did that last time they had a sale. I bought about 10 books. I spent, whatever it was, $14. And I enjoyed the digital reading experience. It's certainly not the same as reading the physical copy. And I certainly do enjoy the tactile experience. It's part of my age showing. But the digital comics are good. Like, they do a nice job. The readers are really good. They go panel by panel or page by page. They give you the option. They're a little vibrant for my taste, just because that's what the screens are. Like, they don't do a great job of capturing the tone, the mood, because everything's just so crisp and bright. If you're reading it on an iPad Pro or an iPad, it's just so crisp and clear, and so you lose some of that feel of art, printed art.
Well, but yeah, it's because like color is completely different in printed form than it is in digital form, right? So
it is. It truly is. And even in the same way,
wider.
like printed comics nowadays are printed generally on pretty high quality paper.
Yeah, but there's a limit to what they can do with the ink because of the color, right? Unless you're using high definition printing, where they're printing with multiple magentas and cyans and stuff like that, right?
Well, when we were kids, of course, they were doing dot printing on old printing presses.
It was flexography, yeah. It
was absolutely. Yeah. So you got what you got. Well, now they're going back and they're doing these sort of high quality omnibuses and absolute editions and these beautiful collections of these books, where they go back and they take that art and they go back and they polish it down and they get rid of the dots and everything else. So you're getting it's like remastered. It's like watching a 4K version of a 1960s Bond movie, right? You're getting these beautiful, vibrant things, but it's kind of not right. Also, you're like, I don't remember James Bond's costume being quite so vibrant, like it's not quite right.
Part of the art, though, was in terms of how they would lay down the shading and stuff like that, with given the limited scope they had, because they were printing on newsprint, right, back in those days, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Which would bleed quite a bit, right?
Absolutely, and you can see it in some of the older books. You can see the bleed. Like, if you get, you get misaligned staples, you get misaligned things. It was not a perfect process. It was like they put the comic books on the printing presses after they were done printing the papers. Like, it was not high art. It was pulp. That's what they were. They were pulp. So I enjoyed the digital experience. They do a really good job. I've read some stories only in that form and really enjoyed them. But for me, it still feels, synthetic. It just doesn't feel like the same experience to me. So I'm still not 100% sold. I have friends who are completely sold and regularly buy their books that way and really enjoy them that way. And they like so many people now who don't want to have the physical video collection or the physical music collection. They just want their books on their iPad, and they bring them with them, and they're always with them. You keep 1,000 albums on your iPhone. This way you're keeping 1,000 comic books on your iPhone, and they like that. Right. I'm not there yet. Not to mention the fact that it's not free. It's not cheap. If there was something like Comixology, where at least you pay the monthly fee and you can just sort of read, that's fine. But if you were reading issue by issue or collection by collection, it's expensive. It's an expensive hobby. So
yeah, for sure.
I'll get there eventually. Eventually, I'll get there. And I have a vision of one day being in this beautiful, small, downsized place where I have no stuff, just one really cool device that has it all on there. It's all my music and my movies and my shows and comic books, and I can just be like, what I feel like today.
It's going to be chip behind your ears, what it's going to be.
I'm fine with that.
You'll be like a guy in the episode of Calypso. You'll be lying in a hospital bed somewhere, and they'll be feeding you your
Boop
experience, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Jaime, have you checked out any of the digital comics?
I did have a Comixology account way back when, before Amazon bought them. Back when it was easier to just buy within the app itself, and then Amazon said, no, we don't want to give Apple 15% cut, and so you had to go on the web. Kind of very similar to the Kindle experience on iOS, where you'd go into the web, buy your content, and then you would just have it unlocked on there. And somewhere around there is where I got very upset because they like reset accounts or something, and I wasn't using one password way back then, so I like lost my account. I was like, well, whatever. I'll have to sign up at some point.
Yeah,
re-sign up again.
Yeah, it's again. I really wish in so many of these circumstances. Again, I get that it's copyright law. There's lots of different reasons why they don't do some of these things, and exclusivity and contracts and money, and obviously I'm not a fool, but things like Comixology Unlimited, it hasn't been a short while. It's been out in the States for years, and they advertise it on the app that I have on my phone. It's the same app, and they're like, "Hey, get it now, get it now, get it now." I'm like, "I would if I could. Stop teasing me." It's a shame that there are stuff like that because, there's so much content out there, and what a great platform to have that stuff on. Again, I don't have every issue of Spider-Man. I have hundreds of issues of Spider-Man, but if I wanted to read an entire run, sometimes there's this, you should also read this limited series, and you should also read this, adjunct thing that they added in, and if you're reading an event series like Secret Wars or something, there's all these tie-in books. Well, I don't want to spend all the money on the tie-in books, or I don't want to buy a collection that's just the tie-in books. But I might want to read one or two of them. That's why those things are so genius. Like that's what something like that service is for. But alas, not available to me.
Yeah, it's interesting where all this sort of digital property goes, because at the end of the day, you don't even own it. You own the right to look at it.
Well, did you read that story? There was a great one going around the blogosphere. It was probably 6 weeks or 2 months ago about the fact that Apple can pull your content.
Yeah.
And people were outraged. They're like, "What? But I keep it on there." And they were like, "No. What you're paying for is the right to download something."
Right.
And if you choose not to download it, but just keep it in the cloud, they have the right to have their contracts expire. They don't have unlimited contracts to, for example, Disney content. If Disney, at the end of whatever term they've set out with Apple, wants to pull all of its content off the iTunes store so that they can have you buy Disney Plus, they can. So if you haven't taken the time and you have 20 Marvel movies and all your Star Wars movies and you haven't downloaded them and they drop off the store, they don't owe you anything. They don't have to tell you. It's just not available to you anymore, and it's your choice not to have downloaded it.
Well, this is the same. They've been doing the same thing with operating systems, because as you know, I have a whole bunch of Macs, and back in the day, I would have a CD or a USB drive with the operating system on it, right? And then they went to the store, and then you had to use your Apple ID to download the various versions of the operating systems, and now they're free, but like for instance, we're in Mojave right now, which is 10.14, and before that was High Sierra, which 10.13. You cannot get Sierra anywhere. Like for a while it was there available, but now you can't. If you don't have a copy of it, you can't download it. And even if you do have a copy of the installer, Apple stopped signing it, so it may not actually work for you, right? So if you're not, they're not really. And of course they update the operating systems because of security and breaches and stuff like that, and we all know that. But the reality is, like for me, who's like a retro computer user, I can't go back and run an old operating system because it's just not available to me, right? There's a gap between when operating systems were available on DVDs to when they went to the store, and then because I've got I have a server behind me that I can't do anything with it because it's stuck on Snow Leopard, because the combination of what server software you run with operating systems don't line up. And so we've been seeing this Apple basically making the stuff unavailable to you for the last 3-4 years, right? And that's sort of, to me, that's the sort of future of digital property, is that if you don't get around to reading it now, Jonathan, you may not be able to read it in the future. And I've seen that already with in the time that I've been working on computers. I have files that I can't open anymore.
That's bizarre. Like that. I mean, we knew that was going to eventually be the case. Again, I have Claris Word files, on disks somewhere that eventually that's an antiquated technology, and you're not going to be able to do anything with that. But yeah, the idea of obsolescence, and we saw it to a certain extent with even just mainstream media, right? Like there was a time where you had to go looking really hard to find a record player for a few years there, or a cassette drive. Now those things have sort of swung back in a smaller scope, but you can get those things again. We're going to see, obviously, there will be people who preserve that technology. Your basement is a good place to start. But, some of this technology,
Super 8
VHS cassettes, Super 8s, like think about, 8 tracks. Some of that stuff, some people are devoted to preserving, 78s, there are still out there, but they're not making a lot of new content for them, and they're certainly not making a lot of things to play that content on. And that's where you really lose out. You can own the biggest cassette collection in the world, but if they're not making players, you're up the creek. You could have the big huge pile of 3 1/4 floppy disks, but if you can't find anything to play them on, you're up the creek. It's weird to think of all the things that will over time become obsolete. I mean, even things like it's starting to become less likely you're going to be able to get physical media. We're seeing that stuff starting to disappear again. Alan Cross has a great blog, Journal of Musical Things. He chronicles the demise of the CD.
Right.
CD sales are an infinitesimal fraction of what they were when they were in their heyday.
Yeah.
And all signs point to their inevitable demise. But then they did that for records, and they did that for cassettes, and there'll always be people who want to own physical things, and but then, they'll do what they do with so many of these things. Again, a record album used to cost you proportionately $8-10 for an album when I was in my teens.
Yeah.
Those albums now, I was at a record store just last week, $30-35 for an album. The vinyl's great. It's a lot nicer quality, but holy smokes, that's a lot of money to pay for physical media.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
A 4K Blu-ray disc, we have upgraded to a 4K TV and the 4K Blu-ray player, and the quality's fantastic. The movies look brilliant, but a 4K movie, I was at a store and looked at, wondering what some of the latest films are. Avengers, $40 for the 4K Blu-ray disc.
Wow, really?
Deadpool, Star Wars, Jurassic World, all these for the that's considered the highest quality that you can purchase, and if you want to watch that, $35 to $40 a pop. And that's where the market is right now for those things. So I mean, you can continue choosing to have physical media, and to be fair, that's how you plan against things like Apple pulling the plug on you because they lose their contract, or Disney decides they want to do something different, or whatever the circumstances are for your digital media. But you're going to pay a premium, and you'll face the age-old problem that you described in your podcast. Where do you put all your stuff?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Crazy. Well, I do have a computer that'll open your ClarisWorks documents. Just have to dig it out and turn it on.
Yeah, I at some point I want to go through, and Sherry and I were waxing about our old stuff last week, and I was mentioning zip drives, and I still have some zip disks and zip drive. Yeah. I have my drive, but the drive won't connect to anything because I don't have an adapter that'll make it adapt to SCSI. Yep. So
I can take care of that for you.
I know that it's there. You're this wonderful. It's like living at the feet of the guru. I know that it's there if I need it. It's this great safety net, but not everyone is lucky to have somebody like you who's.
Look, there's a SCSI cable right over there.
Yeah, I found a I'm going to say late 80s, early 90s Mac mouse the other day in one of my boxes. I have a much smaller scale version of your collection of stuff, but again, there's lots of stuff in there, and I'm sure it would be really interesting to go back and look at some of the first stuff I wrote as a journalist, some stuff I wrote, essays and articles, and I'm sure there's some cool stuff in there. Sherry and I, again, we were talking about the passing of Stan Lee. Yeah. And I said, I'm really bummed because I was supposed to meet him in person, and he was supposed to come to town, and unfortunately he couldn't make it. He wasn't feeling well. He was in his 80s at that point, which there you go. Yeah. So I talked to him on the phone. I did a nice interview with him, and it's all recorded. I recorded it on a cassette on my old recorder, as I did with my interviews on the phone back then, just so I can make sure my notes are accurate. And so somewhere in a box in my crawl space, I have a whole box full of cassettes from when I was a reporter, with interviews with, a ton of people, a ton of very famous, celebrities, athletes, politicians. I was a reporter for a long time and had some pretty cool gigs. All that stuff's in there of my voice talking to these interesting people. I could digitize that. I have the capacity to digitize a cassette. I just have to go in and find it and digitize it.
Well, Alan Cross is doing that with his podcast now. He's now doing the history of
ongoing history
music, right? Ongoing history music,
yeah. I and I think to myself, again, for myself, yeah, obviously there's a little bit of curiosity of, although I'm sure I would wince my way through like, oh, what is this idiot, 20-something doing, talking like he knows something when he doesn't know a thing. Yeah. But at the same time, I also think like, yeah, somewhere down the road, maybe my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids would want to hear my voice or look at some of the things that I wrote or, get to know me in that way. And, so then that becomes sort of a little project of, should I be digitizing that? How do I save that? Is
Will they be able to open it?
Well, that's it. And if I digitize it as a form, what format do I save it as? What's the safest thing? Do I need to update it? Like, there's no such thing as permanent media outside of something you physically own and can play. Well, okay. Yeah. Again, I've got boxes full of VHS cassettes too. Yeah. Like I don't play with my VCR very often either. I got one. I don't have an 8-track player. I don't have 8 tracks, but there are people who have those. But, where's the line, right?
Yeah. So, well, surprisingly, MP3 is still around as a format, but Markdown is probably the technology that people will tell you to use.
Yeah. What does that do?
Oh, it's just a raw text format where you format the text. You do your italic and bolding and headlines and stuff like that just with characters, and a Markdown reader will convert that into pretty looking, stuff that you would have used an old word processor for in the past, right? So there's huge arguments we have on our other show about Markdown. I don't participate. Yeah. So anyway, that's it.
All right. Well, always a pleasure, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Ew. Gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors. It helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.